Welcome to Alberta Conservation Association's Harvest Your Own podcast, the resource for everything hunting, navigating through the field, the butcher shop, and the kitchen. Life is all about great food. Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Brad Fenson, an avid outdoor enthusiast who has worked as a freelance journalist, photographer, and public speaker for over 3 decades. I have hunted, fished, and foraged all my life and hope to share my passion for the outdoors. Along the way, I want to encourage everyone to harvest wild proteins and enjoy the satisfaction of providing the next meal for your family. Our goal is to educate, entertain, and inspire individuals to get outdoors and create a connection between food, health, and your future meals. Welcome to Harvest Your Own. We have a special club that we're hosting today. The deer season has come to an end. I've got some friends and people I know that have spent some time in the deer woods this year. And all of us are looking for a special Christmas craft to do something with our deer tags that we didn't use. I'd like to welcome Dan Sturgess.
Hello.
And Linda Zimmerling.
Hello.
And Cassandra Hewitt.
Hiya.
I don't think we're alone in Alberta this year. The deer season was strange. The whole year was strange. You know, we started off with a very late spring. Farmers were putting their crops in still in the middle to late June. Some were even planting in July. Then we had forest fire smoke for 2.5 months that was just absolutely choking. Nobody really knows the impacts of that on wildlife. And then we had some July rains that were excessive enough that our house even flooded. And we went from that to zero moisture to the end of the year and drought conditions throughout the deer season. Edmonton actually recorded the first time ever in the month of November they had zero precipitation. So there's lots of things to look at, but of course we're hunters, so I'm going to make excuses. You know, it was too windy, it was too calm, it was too warm, there's too many coyotes. What did you guys see?
We were serenaded by coyotes every night upon leaving with nothing shot.
Yeah, I saw a lot of interesting things, but I didn't see a lot of deer, I guess. Definitely a lot from my perspective and the other folks that are hunting where I was. We didn't see a lot of fawns. We usually see more fawns than we did this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. As hunters, we have observations, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're correct. Actually, we need to apply science. Dan, you're a biologist. What would you do to determine the deer population?
Oh, well, that would require a big sampling effort over a large area. And there also could be so much variability between each area, right? Like you might have very productive areas where they weren't affected as much, or areas where they maybe had an easier winter. So it would be difficult to tease all that out unless you put a lot of effort towards it.
Right. And I bring it up because, like I said, hunters are great at making excuses. We like to be successful, so we have to blame something because heaven knows it's not us. Right? Cassandra, this was your first ever deer season. You're a novice. I remember talking to you in the spring and you were, I don't even think you wanted to deer hunt this fall.
No, it wasn't really on my radar. To be honest, actually, I finished a goose hunt and then Todd had turned to me and was like, "So deer?" And I actually said no. So this was a last minute decision in October. A few things happened and then I ended up with Linda and Todd mid-November. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about the trip and what you did, what you saw, what you experienced as a new time deer hunter.
Well, the trip was kind of split into 2 or 3. So there was an initial hunt down in Oyen, which was with a Hia, and that was a bit different. We did see a lot, but nothing, there was no rutting. No one was separating, bedding down a lot. No one was grouping, no does and bucks together. But then when I was with Linda and Todd and I saw nothing. And Linda got lucky and saw what we assume is a doe and a larger fawn or something, but other than that, I saw Todd.
So did your season out there make you want to deer hunt again just because it's challenging, or was it just frustrating?
I definitely want to go again. Am I sure if I'll ever actually shoot a deer? That is the big question, but there's only one way to find out, and that's to actually be in front of one, which is the thing that was missing this year.
Right.
So depending on how that goes and how I feel when I'm actually in front of a deer, will be if I continue after, but definitely next season we'll be looking at what I can do again and where I can go.
Linda, you've been hunting deer for decades. Is that safe to say?
Yes, true that.
Yep. And you're also a biologist.
Yep.
So, I mean, you're at a point where you know what you're going to do if you see a buck. There's no question.
Yeah, and I wasn't even antler searching or anything. I mean, I wanted to get a buck. I had a general tag. I would have taken a doe in the last, 3-4 days if she had presented herself. Nobody did. I did have a buck present himself, but through trees, and all I had was a headshot, and I just don't think that's an ethical shot. I don't know that I'm that good, or, I didn't think that shot was worth taking. So had he moved to my left, I had him. He decided to turn around and go right, and I didn't get a shot. So, one of the things I find with deer hunting, though, is the more deer you see, the more, for me, the more I feel like it doesn't matter what I take. I'm just doing this to help manage the population and get some meat in the freezer. When I don't see a lot of deer, I feel like, what's going on with the population, and should I actually be harvesting an animal? Are they here? And with no snow and without being able to see tons of tracks and saying, oh yeah, they're all over here, we're just not seeing it at the right time, I had no sense of what the deer population was this year.
Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't had any recordings of massive deer die-offs. We heard hunters complain that CWD is taking them, but after monitoring deer for 22 years, we know we don't just get a massive die-off all of a sudden from chronic wasting disease. EHD in the States often hits deer and takes large numbers, but we don't have any record of them in central Alberta, of the insects that cause that problem. So, and all of us were in the woods. Did we find skeletons and remains or dead deer from our adventures?
I found 2 skulls, but that was over what I thought was a pretty huge area.
Right. I guess the reason I bring it up is we like to surmise. Social media is full of people that are saying all kinds of things, but none of it's proven. None of it's real. So, I like to take a step back and look at things. I think the average Albertan is used to hunting deer when there's snow on the ground, and that white canvas is magic. You don't appreciate it until you have a year like this when there's no snow. Not only was there no snow, if it was minus 15 or minus 20 degrees, those deer would need a lot more calories than they were taking in, whatever they were eating. So it really put us at a disadvantage. So go back to where we started the show. The agriculture community suffered this year. Crops were planted late. There was not sufficient moisture, uneven moisture, drought. So farmers were complaining about stunted grain crops, and they were poor quality. So is it the best feed for a deer? We're normally used to hunting deer coming and going or in agricultural fields. We're spoiled in Alberta. They come to us. All we have to do is go to the edge of the field. So where were they this year?
That agricultural piece is interesting too, though, because it was kind of hit and miss depending. Like, we spoke to a number of landowners this year, and the last one, I recall the conversation the best because it was just a week ago. He had a great year. And so it so much was hit and miss for where the rain, if they got precipitation, if they delayed their planting, they actually did better, right, because their crops hadn't started and then died because they got no moisture. And so it was really interesting. It was like landowner by landowner for who had actually a good year versus crappy year.
Right. And when we look at a feed equation, like if you had domestic livestock and you tried to turn them into a field without a fence that had very little feed or cover in it versus one that was lush and productive, where are they going to go? So I think there were islands of feed out there that drew deer. Deer are quite adaptive to their habitat. They have a fairly large home range, and they take advantage of any situation they can. What do you think, Dan?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, all of us would, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Get as close to the fridge as you can. Yeah, I think the area I hunt in is specifically in some sandhill area, and there's really not a lot of agriculture there. So we don't usually have an edge of an agricultural field to hunt. So it is a little different that way, but the snow comment you had was bang on. And I mean, we need advantages, being, bipedal, walking around there and using our skills against theirs. So yeah, energetically, like you said, they didn't need to feed a lot. And so why would they put themselves at risk once we start walking around?
Yeah, the snow is a magic thing. If you ever fire a shot and a deer bolts away, man, without snow, you've got a big job in your hand. With snow, it's like you can find a minute speck and follow the tracks and see a specific hoof mark or a foot dragging or all kinds of things. In dry grass and frozen ground, there's nothing.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge. It's we've struggled with that in some years when there's been less snow as well, and with none at all, it was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, even getting a sense of their habits. Like, I don't mind spending a day in the field walking around not seeing a deer as long as I see tracks and I get a sense of where they're hanging out. We just had no clue where to go back to each time.
And I think that is the key. Hunters, we're programmed. I know where I start. I start where I shot my last buck or saw a big deer or something else. That doesn't mean the deer are there this year, but that's where we go. So that we're kind of trained by success, and we go back to the places that have produced in the past, hoping that we can repeat it. But are all the conditions the same? Sometimes we need to step back and analyze what's going on.
This podcast is produced for Harvest Your Own, a program dedicated to those who want to reconnect with food and health through their experiences outdoors. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a resource for individuals to learn more about hunting and the outdoors. There's information to get you started and ensure that your compass stays pointed in the right direction to be successful. Where's your next meal coming from?
Cassandra, you were new. Did you learn how to analyze what to do to look for deer? Like, you had some mentors and people there, and you use your binoculars, but searching the habitat and looking for signs is a big part of being a deer hunter. What did you see or what did you learn this year that'll help you in the future?
Well, I learned a little bit of looking for like game trails and stuff. Down when we were in Oyen, they pointed out some tracks, kind of where we would expect them to bed down during the day, because we were out from legal to legal. Like,
yeah.
But again, we didn't really see anything. So when they were trying to teach us things, it was, in theory, you should see this.
Right.
I mean, we did get lucky where we saw a couple down south bedded, and then you could see where they were potentially going to be in the area another day. The odd shed that at least at some point in time they had passed by, but in terms of like what we learned and what I picked up is looking for game trails. But I didn't see much else besides that and some sheds.
It was a tough year to be a beginner. There's tough lessons for seasoned hunters, and I'd say it's light on lessons for novices, because you did not get to see and experience what we normally see as deer hunters in the province. Dan, you did bring up a good point that I've analyzed. Here's that word again this year. You hunt the rolling sandhills native habitat.
Yeah.
And what I found this year, I had a mule deer tag and also hunted whitetails, is I saw the deer really keen into the native habitats, whether it was bush with transition to wetlands and riparian areas and stuff like that. But I say hunters need to pay attention to their feet when they're in the field. And where I found all of the fresh deer droppings this year was actually on pasture edges or in the edge of the trees. And when you looked at your boots, you'd see that there was still lots of green grass. It was actually still growing.
Yeah.
So, and even if you looked at those droppings, you could tell that it wasn't dry food, and it was an extremely dry fall. Like, I saw deer licking ice trying to get moisture, yet their droppings were pattied, which means they still had pretty fresh feed.
Yeah. No, that was similar to what we saw, and lots of, I guess, where we hunt, you find some of the bigger, older tree stands would be where more of your whitetail hang out, and then there would be the along the edges, a little more of the mule deer type stuff, but lots of overlap, obviously. But yeah, that's kind of what we're used to there. So I don't hunt a lot of the agricultural areas as much.
Yeah. So it was maybe interesting trying to key in on the deer this year because of a change in diet. And, I've often said is when you're having trouble hunting things, go back to their native habitat. You look at mule deer on the prairie, they often avoid agriculture because that prairie fescue and the prairie grasses are so high in protein that nothing else can compete. And we often see this the same. I hunted elk for 11 days this year. They didn't come out of the forest. They didn't need to. So the same thing was going on with other ungulates. It was interesting to see, and I think people needed to adapt the way they hunted this year to find deer. I know that people did deer drives. They pushed deer out of areas that they normally find deer, but most of us don't do drives.
Yeah, I know. I was kind of hopeful later in the season because we saw some definite rut behavior starting up in that kind of that last week. And so I was really hopeful that maybe some grunting and some calling would start bringing them in. And it, we tried and it still didn't yield any benefits there for us. Even tried a few like areas where I said, okay, well, if the deer aren't here and here and here, where are they? Let's try these other areas we don't go to and just see what's going on in there. So we tried to alter, but they're always one step ahead of me.
Yes, it is frustrating. I did find deer in native habitat, and the one thing that I try to do every year, by the third week in November, I set areas that I call rut runs, where white-tailed bucks will chase a doe before they breed. And it's usually a long run up to a mile, sometimes a little bit more, and a buck has to prove his stamina, basically, before a doe will stop. And I find those areas are very historic in terms of where they run and where they chase. And I saw the biggest bucks I saw this year in those historic rut runs in native habitat. A lot of them are on the edge of wetlands and riparian areas, but I did not fill my tag. So I was seeing deer, not as many as I used to, but there are some techniques that you can use to try to key in on deer at different times of the year, especially during the peak of the rut. Linda, were you disappointed in this year's outcome?
No, I mean, but this comes with the caveat, of course, that I did get my cow moose this year. So the deer was going to be gravy. But honestly, I love getting out every day. We hunted hard. And actually, I feel really good in my body because I walked like I got my steps in. And no, it was just, because it wasn't cold. Granted, they weren't rutting, but I was walking. I was happy. It was great to be out. And the weather was too nice, but it was nice. So, no. Am I disappointed? No. I like getting a deer. But like I say, I usually shoot the animal when I feel like there's lots of them. I'm helping with management, and I didn't have that feeling this year because I just didn't see them. But no, I'm still not disappointed. I love that we got out so much, and I still enjoyed the season.
That is a benefit of not filling your tag right away or not at all is you get to keep going. I put in more hours this year in Alberta than I have in a very long time. And we talked about the weather. I think our average daytime temperature was like 6 above in November, which is absurd. But what did that do? It brought out more hunters. I've seen studies where hunter participation is directly correlated to weather. Good weather brings them out in mass, and it brings them out more often. You want to slow them down? Throw a minus 30 in there. So did you see more hunters this year in general?
Actually, we saw about similar or maybe a little more early. I mean, just of course my sample size is just
right.
Out around our little area there. But at the end, that last weekend, I saw very few. So I think a lot of spirits had already been crushed.
Spirits crushed or tags filled?
I didn't hear as many shots as I often do.
No.
We were out every weekend pretty much. So I don't know. I just know that I was expecting more hunters out on that last weekend, and no, they weren't there. So wherever they were, maybe happily enjoying their deer at home. Who knows?
I know I hunted some conservation sites this fall and saw more hunters than I've ever seen. Like I was quite surprised at the participation. And that will lead to another podcast with Linda because I did talk to some of them. And the main reason they were so crowded on the conservation sites is they were all cowards about asking for permission on private land. It's interesting what impacts us as hunters and what makes us successful, what makes us spread our wings and look at new things. Sometimes it's our success rate when we're out deer hunting. Sometimes it's the fact that we can get on land without having to knock on a door. So, man, there's a lot of factors that play into success, isn't there?
That is the truth. My nephew kept asking me, where should I go? Where should I go? And I said, well, just talk to some landowners because, if you're seeing them at all, that's a bonus. No one else is even seeing them. So if you're seeing them on someone's land, go knock on a door, ask. You never know what you're going to get until you ask. So, yeah, I mean, if you were seeing deer, go ask the landowner.
Right.
This podcast was made possible by Alberta Conservation Association and the Harvest Your Own community. If you're interested in harvesting your own food, there's a comprehensive collection of information to gain insight and knowledge. Head to the field, harvest your own protein, prepare it, and taste the results. HarvestYourOwn.ca is a library of information from getting started and geared up to processing, butchering, and cooking wild game to make the connection between health and food.
We talk about hunter excuses. I actually like that because I know I've made them over the years. When I'm not successful, I have to come up with excuses. So we dealt with 2 full moons. We had one on November 27th. So the days coming up to a full moon and going away, it actually stays at 100% for a few nights. It's at 98, 99. It takes a very long time to change when it's at that full period. So it impacts over a week of hunting. We also had a full moon on October 28th, which meant it extended into early November. In all, I'd say over a third of our season was impacted by a moon phase that is not ideal for deer movement during daylight hours.
I agree with that 100%. I commented it a number of times as we were walking out that I didn't need my headlamp because you can see everything. So, and then other days when we seemed to be getting away from the moon, it was windy. And I don't find the deer like to move if it's windy. They really can't hear as well. And because it was warm, they didn't have to feed, they didn't have to move. And on windy days, you just didn't get them coming out either. So it's between the moon, the wind, I'll just get on board that complaining excuse wagon because it just wasn't coming together.
It works, doesn't it? It feels good to make excuses why you didn't get a deer. Dan, do you watch the moon phase at all?
Yeah, I definitely watch it and like to see what's happening because I feel like it does affect the movement. And also you can have a pretty bright moon, but if you have enough cloud cover, it's not a problem too much, I find. But it was some very clear nights this year while the moon was out, and it was beautiful nights outside, I guess, but that's when the deer might have been moving around.
I was surprised how bright it was, even with no snow cover. Like over the years, I've seen it where you get up at the end of legal light and you're like, wow, it's like there's more light than there was at 10 o'clock this morning, and you're walking out. But this year, without the snow, it was noticeably bright. You could see a long ways. Linda, you made an interesting comment. I love your excuse about the wind. There were days this year, it was either too calm or too windy. There were very few that were just right, is the way I'll put it. But, no matter what the conditions, those deer are always feeding every day. They don't just hide from the wind. They don't hide from the weather. They don't hide from the cold. They don't stop feeding because it's too warm. And as hunters, I guess that's part of our puzzle, and our key to success is figuring that out.
Well, you're right in that they don't stop feeding, but I think they choose their areas with a little more cover. Like, they weren't coming out into open areas. They didn't need to take that risk. They weren't hungry, so they didn't need to expose themselves to wind so that they can't hear predators. They didn't need to expose themselves to bright light so predators can see them. They could stay and find food within, riparian areas and covered areas. And is like, you find where you want to sit for the evening and you try and give yourself some decent sight lines into some openings. If they're not coming into an opening, it doesn't matter how much you can see. They're just not coming out.
How true. Yeah, I was frustrated this year. I sat till dark every time I was out, and often did not see a deer. You get home and the trail cameras would send you a picture, and they're moving 2-3 hours after dark.
Yes, that was my favorite one. We'd get into getting ready for bed, and Todd would show me the trail camera that I sat at. I was like, I don't need to see that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Cassandra, you pay attention to social media. How do you think the average hunters are reacting to Alberta's deer season this year?
Well, they're kind of all over the place. So there's some people who are, it is the year, whatever, tag soup, live and move on. And then there's others who are kind of, as you put it, the hunter excuses. It people are going out and they're not taking mature bucks, or they're too many that are truck hunting. So it's taking away from people who are going and sitting. Others are saying that there's too many predators. So they think that people should hunt more predators, or it should be a requirement almost to hunt predators to get a deer tag or anything. So it's a little bit all over the place. There's people who are just, another year. It is what it is. Now I've got a, Christmas tree decoration or hanging it off their dash or something. And then there's others who are coming up with every line in the book that they can come up with to find a reason.
It's part of those excuses again, right? And, let's look at the bright side. There's lots of coyotes out there this year. Obviously, we all saw lots. Maybe it's a function of the weather. Maybe the population's the same. They're just more visible. We have no proof of there actually being an inflated coyote population, but it sure looks that way. Thank goodness there's not deep snow. They would have a huge impact on our deer if there was. So there's a bright side. You have another bright side to a season without venison in your freezer and above average temperatures and no snow?
I don't know if I do, because I actually enjoy a lot of snow in winter. I like to ski, cross country, and downhill. I like to get out ice fishing. I guess that we should still make some nice ice this year when it gets cold. I like snowmobiling. That's probably not going to happen very much. So I love the snow. It's so for me personally, it's something I need to have to kind of have fun in winter.
Yeah, I love the snow too. I miss it greatly this year. But I think if we're looking for a benefit, I think the deer are going to have an exceptionally good winter. If we're looking at an expanding population where the does will have their fawns in the spring and habitat conditions are good, we have a winter that's lined up like we had like 20 years ago when our deer population just absolutely burgeoned in the province, and we saw more deer than we ever did. It was the last time I remember a Christmas when they were skiing and golfing in the national parks and there was no snow on the ground in all our major cities. So, sometimes we need to look at the bright side. And if deer hunting was tough this year, maybe next year we're going to make up for it and have extra moisture, snow, and cold, and hopefully a stronger deer population than we did this year. But we still don't know if the population is strong or not. So, but we would take an improved population. What do you think, Cassandra? You going to buy a deer license again next year?
I think I will. If anything, not filling a tag this year just is more of a drive to try next year. I think if there was almost too much success in one year, it kind of, all right, now what? Instead of a continue. I know other people go into that kind of fever, but I'd rather work at it than, having an easy season for the first season.
Right.
It just means that there's next year to improve, do better, try again, and it's just the way it goes.
That's a very good way to look at it. I remember my first deer season, I shot a deer probably within the first 5 minutes of ever hunting, and then I had to sit and watch, and I was not happy about it. Not happy at all. The next year I shot one this opening day, and after that I started to change the way I looked at deer and wanted to find antlers and bigger antlers, not because I'm a trophy hunter, just because it prolonged my season. So, I should be very grateful for the season I had this year because it was extremely prolonged. It was almost painfully long.
Yeah, that's how I felt. It's like, okay, I'm working hard at this. Like, I'm really working hard at this. I deserve this deer. And then not to get it, it was a little bitter. I'll tell you that. It was a bitter pill. But I still, like I say, when you ask me, was I disappointed? Well, okay, yeah, I was disappointed, but not to the point that I wasn't still happy about the season. I still loved that I got out so much. The thing is, then if you get yours early, then you have a chance to mentor and take someone else out. Like, there's always opportunities to increase your season, even if you've already got your deer early.
Yes, and that's a good way to look at it. It's disappointing that you didn't actually fill your tag, but the hunting was spectacular. It was an adventure. It was fun-filled. It was educational. And you still got to mentor, even though you didn't fill a tag.
For sure. And I'll do it again. Like, Yeah, hopefully. And I mean, then the younger generation, or even new hunters that are older, they get a sense that, okay, you don't have success all the time. You have to put in a little bit of effort, and that snow is really important.
What do you think, Dan? Was it a long season for you?
Yeah, I think I agree with Linda. Where at the end of it, the last weekend we went out, I guess I could have gone out a few more days because I think the 30th was kind of the midweek or something, but I was kind of done by the last day. We hunted hard all season and worked pretty hard trying to get my kids some opportunity. And just by that last weekend, we worked hard then, and I just felt like, yeah, I'm good. I'm done. That was fun. I had a great time. Again, I agree totally, Linda. I don't know what a year would be without a hunting season for me. It would feel pretty strange.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, I look forward to it all year. So it would be really weird if I just said, oh no, I'm not going to go some year. So I did enjoy it a lot, but I didn't, I was frustrated at the end a little bit, but so now it's over.
You just call the truce and you'll resume activities next year. Yeah,
I figure, I've won a lot of years here, so it's time that they got to win.
Right.
All those ones on my camera, they'll be bigger next year. And
Yeah.
hopefully conditions will be such that I'll be able to find them.
Absolutely. And on a bright side again, thank goodness we live in Alberta, because if you don't have venison, there's still undersubscribed antlerless elk tags. They're still shooting snow geese in southern Alberta in December. There's lots of ducks, honkers. Our grouse season runs till January 15th. I must say there is an extreme unfair advantage for snowshoe hares this year that have turned white with no snow on the ground. So if people are still hungry for some wild game, there's lots of opportunity to get out there and still put some wild proteins in your freezer and enjoy the great outdoors.
We did that exactly last weekend. The deer season was over, but we grabbed the dogs, went to pick up our trail cameras, and brought a shotgun in case there was some grouse.
Nice. What about you, Cassandra? Are you done for the year, or is there still something that might draw your attention before everything comes to a close?
If opportunities present, I'll go back out for birds or something. But unless something does, I mean, if this is the end of my season, it was a good season and it was the first, so I have no complaints.
Good. And Dan, you said you still had quite a bit of wild proteins in your freezer, so you're not going to despair.
Yeah, luckily we didn't feel the pressure at the start of the year, and so we didn't have to really put anything down early or worry about getting meat in there. We still have a moose from last year and some deer from last year, and so that's all good. The other thing I like in Alberta, or at least where I hunt, is that there's so many tags that I can get every year that if we did need something, we could have,
right.
I could have probably got a mule deer doe early and got some meat in the freezer. People will see all the tags I have. They said, how are you going to get so many animals? I'm like, it's not about getting that many. It's about having the opportunity to maybe get one of them and to really help out, take the pressure off.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like to thank you for joining the No Venison This Year club. It's not a club I ever thought I'd be a part of or anything, but I think we have a good message here. Hunters that are out there and put their best foot forward and gave things the good old college try. Don't feel bad if you didn't come home with a deer. Lots of people didn't. It's part of the hunting equation is figuring out all of the different components and what the deer do, where they live, what they feed on. And you know what? They just changed things up on us this year. So good for them. I'm going to have to start paying more attention to things and sharpen my pencil in terms of strategizing for next year. But I'll definitely be back out there. And I hope to see you next year in the field. And Dan, I have a feeling that you're not going to wait till the end of the season to try to fill any extra doe tags you have.
Yeah, exactly. Also, I had a wildly successful December 1st hunt for Christmas trees.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
'Tis the season.
It was.
Well, thanks for joining us. And, if you hear somebody else making excuses for why they didn't get a deer this year, tell them to tune in to Harvest Your Own.
Sounds good. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
We hope to inspire people to reconnect with nature and appreciate where your food comes from by harvesting your own. For more information on getting started or to learn specifics about the Field to Fork experience, visit harvestyourown.ca and follow on Facebook and Instagram. Check back often for new material, recipes, and videos that are posted regularly. Please subscribe to Harvest Your Own podcast and take the time to rate and review the show to help us build a dedicated core of passionate hunters as our regular audience. Until next time, embrace the outdoors and all it has to offer. Thanks for joining us.